Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Bud Light. Anson Frericks, former Anheuser-Busch president of sales and distribution, explains the company's downfall started when it prioritized DEI and ESG goals over business success. And if you'll remember, the Bud Light explosion, the reaction on social media, is what got people so interested in what Target was doing. It was the beginning of the end of these ridiculous woke policies. The controversial Bud Light partnership with Dylan Mulvaney triggered a massive backlash, especially from conservative customers and normal people. Anheuser-Busch's headquarters move from St. Louis to New York marked a cultural shift inside the company that distanced them from its Midwestern roots. Marketing campaigns with political undertones like the Bud Light Party and LGBT-focused ads alienated the normal people. And to make things even worse, internal policies at the company shifted focus from merit-based promotions to diversity-focused goals, creating tension within the company. Because if you work for a company and you don't get advancement based on what you actually contribute to the company, then why are you going to be satisfied at that company? It just creates friction between everyone. Executives felt pressure to meet DEI benchmarks at Anheuser-Busch, diverting attention from improving sales and product quality. The backlash against their ridiculous campaigns was amplified by social media and public figures like Kid Rock, leading to significant sales declines. President Trump's DEI bans are expected to encourage companies like Anheuser-Busch to reconsider their diversity initiatives. And many of those companies are, even Disney. Frericks suggests that companies heavily invested in DEI will face continued public scrutiny and financial consequences. The Bud Light controversy is seen as a broader reflection of the risks that companies face when mixing politics with branding. Always a poisonous combination that never really works out well. Semaphore sat down with Anson Frericks, former sales and distribution president for Anheuser-Busch, and he lays it all out. From Semaphore, how Bud Light killed DEI. Anson Frericks says he tried to warn them. For a little over a decade, Frericks worked at Anheuser-Busch InBev, finishing his time at the company as president of sales and distribution. He left in 2022 to co-found Strive, the anti-woke investment company that rebelled against diversity, equity, and inclusion and environmental, social, and governance guidelines for companies. They argued that political and ideological goals were crowding out policies that made sense for shareholders. Because it really is difficult to have a successful business. There are some people that seem to be able to just have one success after another with their companies. That's actually very rare. Sometimes that's luck, sometimes that's the individual. But companies on a day-to-day basis face a lot of competition. They face a lot of issues. Sometimes the issues are related to their employees. The challenges never stop. So when you try to introduce into that system all of these social agendas that have nothing to do with properly doing the work and delivering for customers, it always results in a less effective company. Anson's Strive co-founder Vivek Ramaswamy ran for president. Frericks watched InBev tumble into controversy after a Bud Light sponsorship video with transgender influencer superstar Dylan Mulvaney backfired, turning the brand into a conservative punchline. In Last Call for Bud Light, Frericks writes about what he saw inside the company, published at a moment when a new president of the United States is trying to root out those policies from the public and private sectors. And here's their interview. One of the turning points you write about after the company is purchased by InBev is the decision to move headquarters from St. Louis to New York. What was the impact of that? Anson responds, the company had been headquartered in St. Louis since the 1870s. It was the heartland. There's an old saying, if it plays in Peoria, it'll play across the country. And Peoria is pretty close to St. Louis. After the company was bought by InBev, a lot of the executives who had been living in New York moved to St. Louis, which wasn't the sort of metropolis they were used to. Their rationale for moving the company was, well, we can't get great talent to St. Louis. This is around the time that Donald Trump is coming up, running for president the first time. So the move is almost a metaphor about culture moving to the coast. You lost a lot of people that were more Midwestern or family-oriented. You picked up a lot of people that were younger, more urban in their tastes. In the Midwest, Bud Light, Budweiser, had 50% plus market share. It was much less in New York. I'd say that the Dylan Mulvaney downfall started there. We started dropping country music sponsorships and started replacing them with techno festivals and techno sponsorships. Then they ask him, "You write about the Bud Light Party campaign in 2016 and how ineffective it was when one part of that emphasized LGBT rights and gay marriage. What was the long-term impact of that? Why wasn't it a warning of what didn't work?" It was just a really ineffective campaign with a slight leftist tilt to it. Seth Rogen and Amy Schumer were the spokespeople, but their ads didn't really move the needle in New York or Los Angeles. Neither did the LGBT commercials. The message was, nobody wants Bud Light to even be close to politics. The people who worked on that campaign were fired. But that was 7 years ago, and the lesson was forgotten. What sort of policies got implemented that weren't necessarily increasing shareholder value? The company always talked about its 10 principles, which guided everything. They were dreaming big, acting like owners, and attracting the best talent. One principle was that we promote people based on their abilities. We promote people based on the quality and diversity of their teams. There were diversity dashboards introduced at the organization. All of a sudden, you would see your team there with breakdowns of how many people were black, white, and a bunch of different immutable characteristics. It was very clear what that meant internally. The surveys that asked if people were satisfied with this were high, but they were encouraged to be high. If the CEO of the company has a DEI target, he says the people below me need to have high scores. You focus on that, and you get punished at each level of the organization if you did not have a good score within your division. I think it was a distraction, the amount of time that the company was spending on employee affinity groups and increasing DEI scores, as opposed to figuring out how we're going to improve the business. A lot of the problems you had to address would be told to you by the Human Rights Campaign people. You need LGBT positive commercials, and you need to offer gender affirming care for your employees if you want to get 100% on your survey. Because those surveys where they ask questions of the employees and how the company offers benefits to their employees and how woken up are the companies, those are completed at the companies and then sent to this organization called the Human Rights Campaign. And then the Human Rights Campaign scores you and tells you what you need to do differently to increase your score so they control the operations of your company. 20 years ago, the score was based on actions like make sure you are not excluding LGBT people from your hiring practices. Fair enough, but it got very aggressive over time. Alyssa Heinerschied, who was the vice president for Bud Light in 2023, got a lot of the blame for what happened. What was her role? We had a guy who was a 40-year company veteran, Andy Goehler, as the head of Bud Light. He was probably the best marketer the company ever had. He did revive Bud Light for a time after the disastrous Bud Light Party campaign. He came up with Dilly Dilly. But I think the company, as part of their DEI mandates, wanted to make a point of having the first female vice president of Bud Light. He says he knew Alyssa. He says, I don't remember her being a remarkable employee. And I think she brought her politics to the job. At that time, in 2021 and 2022, you couldn't really push back on brand people who said they wanted to make it more progressive and do more political advertising. And something that might fly in New York City might not fly in the rest of the country, where the customer base actually was. With the Dylan Mulvaney partnership, I don't think that people in Chelsea realized how controversial the transgender movement was. Chelsea is a trendy area in New York. At the time, there were 25 bills in various state legislatures about banning gender-affirming care for minors or biological men competing against women in sports. When they saw that sponsorship, a lot of people scratched their heads, and the company could either stand by Alyssa and Dylan Mulvaney and say, quote, no, this is the direction of the brand. We're going to be like Ben & Jerry's, or hey, we screwed up and this is not what the brand stands for. The response was indicative of a company that could not serve multiple masters. The interviewer mentions, I have a Bud Light koozie on my desk from the Vivek Ramaswamy campaign. You know Vivek really well. Did his campaign have an impact on any of this? Did Trump? Anson responds, I don't think that had much of an impact. I think it was Kid Rock lighting up a case of Bud Light and the broader social media reaction. I think that exemplified the feelings of a lot of people in middle America. Quote, man, you know, the last couple of years, I kept my mouth shut when the NFL allowed players to kneel on the ground because I wanted to watch the game. When Disney got involved in the parental rights issues in Florida, well, there's only one Disney World and my kids really want to go. Then all of a sudden you do this with a working class man's beer. You could see the effect right away. Sales data gets reported from Walmart and Kroger and 7-Eleven. It was coming out every week, showing Bud Light sales were down 10%, 20%, 30%. That gets amplified on social media, where you're seeing beer lines 20 people deep for Coors Light and nobody in line for Bud Light. People were just tired of brands getting involved in progressive issues that historically had nothing to do with the product. So what impact do you expect on all of this from Trump's orders banning DEI? I think it's going to be threefold. I think certain companies where DEI was never really part of their authentic culture have covered to quickly roll it back. You've already seen Tractor Supply companies, Harley-Davidson, Walmart, companies that sell to an audience that never really believed in these policies anyway. There's a second group of companies, I'll put Meta in that category, that just didn't see these policies helping their bottom line. They saw that a lot of the systems for employees were divisive, and the calls by employees to get involved in political issues didn't help them at all. The third group of companies are hardcore believers in DEI, and they'll probably be resistant. You've seen companies like Costco and JP Morgan double down. I think those companies are going to continue to get dragged into headlines and have problems explaining their actions. And I think it will probably eventually go away. But I don't think that we can say that we're at the end of DEI. If you're not with one of those companies and the Human Rights Campaign wants a meeting on diversity and inclusion, do you just not take it? Is that the move? Anson responds, just don't take the meeting unless it's part of your business. If you're a business in downtown New York City and you work with DEI consultants, maybe it's worth it. Otherwise, I don't think it makes sense to have meetings with those groups that have nothing to do with the mission of your organization. And in a second interview in Fox Business, Anson Frericks explains Bud Light has not recovered from the Mulvaney controversy, and here's the numbers. Bud Light saw a nearly 30% drop in sales, with an exodus in customers following the partnership. Bud Light has not yet recuperated from the Dylan Mulvaney controversy, according to a former Anheuser-Busch executive. Quote, they have not at all recovered, according to former Anheuser-Busch President of Operations, Sales and Distribution, Anson Frericks. Despite companies backing away from pushing politics through DEI and ESG policies, the damage to the Bud Light brand is still taking its toll as they continue to shed customers, according to Frericks. Bud Light sales were down 29.9% year over year for the week ending January 20th, compared with the same period last year before the controversy, according to the latest numbers provided to Fox Business by good old Bump Williams Consulting. Quote, I think that's one of the most interesting parts about this story is that they lost 30% of their customers, he pointed out. Millions of customers, billions of dollars of shareholder value over the last couple of years. Quote, they're advertising Bud Light, and candidly, the commercials are actually pretty good, he said. They have Shane Gillis, who's about the opposite of Dylan Mulvaney. You couldn't have maybe somebody more opposite. They have Post Malone, but the problem is they've lost a lot of their customers. No, what they actually need to do is to have a biological woman dressed the way Dylan Mulvaney was, recreating that commercial and making a parody of Dylan Mulvaney. And bring Dylan Mulvaney in on it if you have to so that Dylan isn't offended or whatever. But the opposite of Dylan Mulvaney is not actually Shane Gillis, not in my opinion. Frericks also pointed out the dilemma Bud Light faces regarding its vision. Quote, their customers are asking them, hey, what is Bud Light going to be moving forward? Is it going to be more than Shane Gillis and fun and football, or is it Dylan Mulvaney? Until the company really comes back and says clearly what Bud Light is going to be, I don't know if any of their loyal customers are ever going to come back, according to Frericks. If you work at a for-profit business, the purpose of your company is to make a profit now as well as in the future. That's the purpose of the company. Anything else that you try to do with the company creates friction in the system when you're trying to deliver on those goals. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me make even more videos, subscribe to the channel and become a paid member today.